What does it mean to be Christian? Over 2 billion people in the world, or roughly 1/3 of the total population on the planet, call themselves Christian. But what does that really entail? Yes, you have your holiday traditions and special occasions and so forth, but what is the ideology? What is the philosophy of Christianity? In order to get an understanding of a philosophy, it's always important to go to the person who first articulated it. So in the interest of trying to understand what Christianity is all about, it helps to go to look at the words of the person who the movement is based around. So, in today's lesson, we're going to look at the text of the Sermon on the Mount, a speech that Jesus gave to his followers, and to consider what are the ideas being presented and what impact can they have for us. So let us look at the text. It begins, Matthew chapter 5, by saying, "And seeing the multitudes, he went up into the mountain, and when he had sat down, his disciples came unto him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they that hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Now, how can we interpret this opening statement? Who is he talking about? Okay? I would make the case that he is speaking to the downtrodden, the oppressed, the lower class, the average, the poor person, right? The meek, the humble, okay? Those who are poor in spirit, those who are mourn, those who are having a difficult time in life. These are the people that Jesus is saying are blessed, right? Now, this point can be extrapolated on. If you look at the writings of Nietzsche, Nietzsche says that in the context of the culture, you have the Jewish culture and you have the Roman culture. The Romans celebrate success and wealth, whereas the Jewish culture honors the poor and the meek. And Jesus is just articulating this point of view that the meek should be the blessed, and the implicit idea is that the rich and successful are not blessed. Now, Nietzsche's interpretation of Christianity might be subjective to some extent, but nevertheless, the idea seems to be here that those who are having a hard time, those who are having trouble in life, these are the people that Jesus is calling out are being specifically blessed. And what should our attitude be towards people who are having a hard time? Okay? If any man would go to law with thee, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. What is the message here? If somebody needs charity, if somebody needs help, not only should you help them, but you should go the extra mile. So, somebody asks you for $5, you give them 10. Okay? Somebody asks you to borrow your car for a day, you say, oh, you can have it for 2 days. This is the most generous articulation of ethics that we've seen so far. And this standard of charity and compassion is a very high standard. Does everyone who calls themselves Christian live up to this standard? Okay. Are people as charitable as they should be if they want to call themselves Christian? This is an open question. But of course, if you want to be serious about following these doctrines, it does ask a lot of you as far as your attitude towards others, especially the needy. Okay, so a minute ago I characterized Jesus as part of the Jewish culture in contrast to the Roman culture, following along the lines of Nietzsche's analysis of Christianity. But now we should go a little bit closer to the distinction between the Jewish culture that Jesus was surrounded by and his new ideas that he was bringing to the table. Okay, so for the record, Jesus was Jewish, was taught in the tradition of the Hebrew Bible, learned all the stories about Moses and Abraham and Noah, and all the Old Testament law as it's now referred to in the Christian tradition. Did Jesus believe that all the ideas in the Jewish culture and the Hebrew Bible were worth keeping in place? Or did he articulate a different vision of ethics? This depiction here shows the Jewish intellectual leaders looking frustrated with this new teacher. And when you look at some of the statements in the Sermon on the Mount, you see a direct contrast between this old way of doing things and the new path that Jesus is presenting. Here he says, "Ye have heard that it was said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies and pray for them that persecute you." Now, this is just a small slice of the text, but it is worth emphasizing that what Jesus is presenting here is a split, a contradiction, a difference of attitude. There's this other way of doing things where you love the people in your group, in your circle, your neighbors, and then those people outside are your enemies and you should hate them. In contrast, the new idea being presented is you should love your enemies and pray for them that persecute you. So, somebody wants to attack you, you pray for them to do better or something of this nature. Now, what attitude would keep wars going on forever and ever? The first attitude. If you're supposed to hate your enemies, if you're supposed to retain that hatred, then how will war ever end? But if you take on the Christian attitude of loving your enemies, then you would be more inclined to call a truce and try to reconcile opposing views. Okay, here's another point of contrast. Okay, ye have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This is one of the oldest laws of ethics. It's not only in the Hebrew Bible, it also appears in the first law code ever written, the Code of Hammurabi from ancient Mesopotamia. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. We're all familiar with it. Does Jesus agree with this? No, he changes things around. He says, I say unto you, resist not him that is evil, but whosoever smiteth thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Okay? So somebody inflicts something on you which is not called for, someone attacks you, you should not attack back. You should turn the other cheek. And then tied with the previous idea, love them that persecute you. Pray for your enemies, right? Again, this is a high standard of ethics. It's almost unrealistic. Someone asks you for $5, you give them 10. Someone attacks you, you pray for them, and you let them attack you again. This is the most pacifistic, generous, compassionate way of looking at ethics, and it is certainly a high standard which I don't think many people are capable of living up to. It's in our nature to want revenge, to be selfish, and so forth. But this doctrine, this series of ideas, is calling on us to try our best to not just love our neighbors, but love our enemies. And the point must be made again that it is a split from the old way of doing things. So, people that say, oh, the Bible never contradicts itself, this is a contradiction. You either believe in eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, or you believe that you should turn the other cheek and resist not him who is evil. You can't have it both ways. Okay, another set of contrasts I want to draw is Jesus' view on metaphysics. He says, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon the earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth consume, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where thy treasure is, there will thy heart be also." So, what is the idea here? Don't accumulate wealth. Don't tie your sense of purpose and meaning and happiness with physical commodities and worldly possessions. This is irrelevant. What you should be more concerned about is your sense of place in heaven. This is an explicitly metaphysical way of thinking, and certainly requires a certain leap of faith in order to believe in. This last passage I want to present is related to this idea of making a leap of faith in life. He says, "Therefore I say unto you, be not anxious for your life, what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body, what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than the food, and the body than the raiment? Behold the birds of heaven, that they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, and your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are not ye of much more value than they?" So, birds don't worry about their next meal or the harvest next season. God takes care of them. Similarly, you shouldn't worry too much about life. Have faith, things will work out, and so forth. This is a very idealistic view of the world, okay? You have faith that things are going to work out. You don't worry too much about physical possessions. In fact, you should be more concerned with heaven than you are with your worldly possessions. If you do have some degree of wealth, then you should help people out, be charitable. Somebody attacks you, tries to harm you, you pray for them. If everybody believed in this philosophy, the world would just be a fantastic place of a community of brotherhood of man and all this sort of idealistic dream of, everything being peaceful and communal. Now, will this ever work? Will it ever happen that people are loving each other and caring for each other and being compassionate towards each other all over the world? That's an open question. But to the extent that these ideas could take hold in a society, you can see how they would lead to a little more of a sense of cooperation, togetherness, right? Man in a state of nature is potentially violent and aggressive, and so these sort of ideas would make us a little bit more cooperative with each other. So, incorporated into the world, these ideas have done some good for humanity.